I'm just going to start off with a recap from part 1, just so that everybody knows where we were and what we covered and where we ended, in case you missed the first show. Then after the recap, I'm going to go through the projects already, okay? So what's currently live. And I'm only going to go through some of the key ones first. And then I'm going to discuss a little bit on the ways to contribute, because I think this also affects your rewards, basically, on how you want to go about doing it. And then just a couple of watchouts, which I'll highlight later on as you contribute. And then I'll go through 2 bonus strategies, or basically how I think we can be looking at things. And that would determine, or that will help to guide which ways and which projects that you would want to pick and contribute as we move ahead. For me, it's quite a clear chain of thought and it really helped me, so I'm going to share that with you guys as well. First part, what we did was we basically covered what is a parachain auction, which is essentially the new way of how projects get themselves listed on the Polkadot parachain. And we also talked about what is a crowd loan, right? So basically it's about how projects are able to crowdsource or crowdfund, right, in order for them to make their bid and hopefully win the auction, so that they can be one of the first few projects to be on the Polkadot parachain. So we discussed and said that this was quite a smart way of Polkadot doing it, because that's how they manage the supply and demand on their parachains, and as a result, the end users like us, we get a lot of benefits out of it, because projects are forced to be competitive and offer good rewards and stuff like that. We also discussed its implications, so things like the length of the login period, the market landscape with the winter that's coming. This is something that again has been ascertained by someone who has quite a bit of credibility, right? So he's also saying that in quarter 4, 1 year post halving is usually the last leg, and that is essentially now, right? So we need to take this into consideration as well, and that's what we sort of discussed in the previous show. And this applies to some of the other stuff that we are holding as well. So we don't want to miss out on our profits and hold all our assets through the profits, and we're stuck with it for a good 2 years or so. We also discussed the rewards and also the potential of capital gains that you can get from DOT if, let's say, you're not going to participate in the crowd loans and you just decide to sell. So there's just a couple of things that I wanted to add on from that, because along the way I found out that there were very interesting features on this site. You could expand all rows, and it essentially sort of calculates to a certain extent how much you will get from your contributions, right? So this is as per 1 DOT. So if at this point, if they accumulate a 30 million worth of DOT, then you're only going to get 5.67 Acala. And for Moonbeam, if there's 30 million, then you're only going to get about 3 Glimmer. Right, so this already sort of gives you an indication as to how much you are going to get, and it goes back to the first show when I spoke about how rewards for Polkadot is relative and it's not absolute like Kusama, right? So as you can see here, it's coming down as the contributions get higher and higher. So we are currently about 12.7, which is what you are seeing, and as it is, you are already getting about 13 Acala. And here, same, at this current rate, you are getting about 13 Glimmer. Then second thing is, there is going to be a minimum of 5 DOT contribution. So this is something that I've missed out. So if you're not aware, you can't contribute 1, except if you are contributing through Binance. Okay, and I'll go through that later. And then just to also share a little bit about how the auctions work, right? So basically what's going to happen is, you see that auction 1 to 5, it happens across 5 weeks. Okay, which means every week, right, only the top 1 is going to win. Okay, so let's say if Acala follows through and they win, then for the week of November 11 to 18, it's going to be Acala who wins first. Then Moonbeam and the rest below it will have to go and try in week 2. So if Moonbeam still holds on and they are in the second place, then they are going to win in week 2. And if Parallel Finance still stays at 3rd place at the end of the 3rd week on the 2nd of December, then they are going to win the third place. Okay, so the first round, 5 projects will go through, and then in the second round, there are going to be 6 that will get through. So there will be a total of 11 projects on the parachain. But for the second round of auctions, there's only 4 projects now, right? But of course, along the way, this is still quite far out. Then we are going to be able to add more and more projects who will announce. I'm going to move on to the projects that are available, and of that 8, I'm going to cover 5 today, which is the main ones. Basically, that will be Acala, Moonbeam, Parallel Finance, Astar, and Manta Network. Okay, so this is extremely important. You first need to understand what the projects are. If you don't, then you will not have that belief or that conviction into what you are putting in. And especially if you're talking about 96 weeks, it's going to be a long, long time. Acala is essentially the first one that I'm going to go through, right? It is the front runner at this point in time. So Acala is very straightforward. I would think that it is going to be the most popular, and I thought it would be the same with Karura as well, but apparently it didn't happen there. But on paper, it's definitely huge, right? Because it's the decentralized financial hub of Polkadot. On Acala, right, it's like a decentralized hub, which means you can go there and stake your items. You can go there and swap for items. You can go there and mint your stable coin, which is the Acala dollar, AUSD, so that you can do other things with it. And the best part is it's also compatible with Ethereum. Like a real utility case here, like for Acala to be like huge, because it's a whole platform on its own, and it's Ethereum compatible. I'm just going to show you the Karura one first. Okay, so because this is kind of like live, the Acala one, I think it's still building. You can essentially do your swapping here. You can set up an LP pool here to be able to get more yield, right? You can do liquid staking as well. And then if you swap, you can even swap stuff out, kind of like a whole platform all together. It's like kind of like your Uniswap or your Pancake Swap kind of thing, and a little bit more. Moonbeam is going to be next that I'm going to cover. Okay, so Moonbeam is big because Moonbeam essentially helps the integration of Ethereum into Polkadot. So it allows Ethereum compatible smart contract to be on Polkadot. So we know that Ethereum is huge. So when this happens, this is going to value add a lot, because a lot of like for ETH, right, it still remains to be the most highly utilized despite its limitations. So it might be slow, it's high in gas, you can say whatever you want, right? But at the end of the day, it's still the OG blockchain, right? And everybody, or most of the exciting stuff are still on it. So when Moonbeam comes along and it allows the integration of smart contracts from Ethereum, it allows kind of like projects on the Ethereum blockchain to kind of feature on the Polkadot blockchain as well, without the limitations that Ethereum has. A question that I have for you, which I think about a lot, is do you believe in a multi-chain future, right? So I guess with the way things are going now, with the many blockchains that are up and coming, like with Solana, well, I would say ADA as well, even though it's a little bit slower, things like Phantom, these are the projects, things like AVAX as well. So these things are all up and coming, right? So in the past, it was kind of like a single chain kind of a network with Ethereum leading the way. But I think with the limitations that I've discussed and the number of options that are becoming available now, it's going to become a multi-chain future, whereby it's not only going to be Ethereum that are running most of the exciting things now, but eventually things like Moonriver, Moonbeam, things like Polkadot, things like AVAX, things like Solana is definitely going to catch up as well. And if you have already used it, I think you would be able to say that it really allows scalability, right? The transactions are fast, the gas fees are low, and it indirectly allows for a wider adoption of things, which is what crypto is about, right? So so this really supports the Moonbeam narrative, because it allows the integration of Ethereum smart contracts onto the Polkadot. I'm going to move on to Astar first, okay? So Astar, to me, it's kind of like the black horse, right? I think I mentioned this in the first stream. But as I started to read, I do agree, it's quite cool. So I'm going to explain why. So what does Astar do? It has a similar utility as Moonbeam, which is it helps to integrate the Ethereum block smart contracts, okay? I wouldn't go so far to say that it's like Moonbeam on steroids, right? But it appears like it has a few additional perks as to what Moonbeam is currently offering. So to keep things as simple, not to get too technical, right? It supports two features of integration. So what that means is like currently to be able to integrate, most projects use the Ethereum virtual machine, or EVM for short. But Astar believes that in future, you need to use web assembly. Okay, so I got a couple of links here just to show you guys what is EVM as well, right? So it's very technical stuff, but it's basically just it's like the back-end stuff, like the engine which runs all the entire operations for Ethereum, right? So this is what is currently used now. But in future, what Astar thinks is that you need web assembly. So it's basically just another format of doing things and how you integrate things, right? So that's why I feel they have the additional perks, because they're not only thinking about now, but they're thinking about future and how they can integrate stuff. Okay, especially the Ethereum smart contracts on Polkadot. And on top of that, only Astar supports DApp staking, your decentralized app staking. Okay, so you are going to see things like you are able to stake stuff from your apps, and it's all going to be supported by Astar, and they are the only ones that can do it now. Right? So if you look at this, it's like, okay, they used to be called Plasm, now they are called Astar, right? So you're going to be able to go on and you're able to kind of like do this kind of staking, and it's only supported by Astar. And the last part about why I really like this is because they got scalability, which means they are also looking at layer 2 solutions. There's an unmet need now because there's only 1% of people that are using blockchains, but it's already so full, right? But beyond that, beyond what I just told you, they are also looking at layer 2 solutions. And that to me is really very future and forward looking. So that's why I would say that there's additional perks. It's really kind of like a black horse. I don't think the marketing is as huge as what Moonbeam has to offer, or Acala for that matter. That's why it's not really being featured that much. So the next thing that I'm going to cover is parallel finance, okay? So parallel finance, if you just look at it as it is actually nothing much. Okay, so well, I don't mean to sound so lackluster about parallel finance, right? But if you look at it from the top, they are just a decentralized lending, staking, and borrowing built on the Polkadot ecosystem. So what that means is that if you were to go onto the system, right, what it does is it just allows you to go on and borrow stuff. Okay, so like you can, if you have, let's say you have DOT, you are able to put your DOT as collateral and then and borrow for something else at some interest rate, so that you can take that stable coin, for example, and do other things with it. Right, so this is essentially what parallel finance is. It's like I would say it's kind of like a bank lah, whereby you can go there, you can lend, you can borrow. If you lend, you earn a yield on it, so that's a little bit like staking. So essentially that's what they do, but it helps you to stretch your dollar, especially if you are looking to hodl some of your coins. So that's exactly what I said, right? If you are already going to have DOT, or if you're already going to have Kusama and you're not looking to do much with it, then you might as well stretch your dollar, right, by doing something with it, by using it as a collateral for something else, for your stable coin, so that you can go and buy some other coins with it. So this platform allows you to do that. Parallel finance is not what it is, but it's actually what it offers when you contribute. Okay, and I'll cover that a little bit more when I talk about the different ways to contribute. Last one, Manta Network is essentially a privacy layer. Okay, so if privacy is your kind of thing, then this is something for you. Okay, it's a privacy layer for the Polkadot ecosystem. First use case, extremely exciting. It's a privacy preserving decentralized exchange. Okay, so it's kind of like your Uniswap, PancakeSwap, right? It's a decentralized exchange, but it's privacy preserving. Okay, so how does this work is if you go onto the platform and you deposit a base coin, say DOT, it has a technology or a system that receives the coin and then it generates a privacy preserving version of it so that it's harder to be tracked or it cannot be tracked. So what they say is that and I tend to agree with that, is that this type of use case is extremely important in DeFi versus your traditional finance, which is your banks or your centralized exchanges, right? Because it's permissionless, there's no KYC, and there is no there's essentially no one looking out for you, and therefore such a feature will benefit people, right? And in this case, the DeFi space is also more susceptible to hacking. So the Manta Network is supposed to come out and fill that gap, right, by adding a privacy layer to a decentralized exchange. So when I talk about ways that you can contribute, I've essentially just broke it down into two different parts. Okay, so you can contribute directly or you can also contribute indirectly. Okay, so what I mean by contribute directly is just a traditional way of doing so, which means you just stake, get your rewards, right? So if I give you an example here, it's just like this. So on Acala, right, if you were to go to this page and you were to click join now, it will lead you to this page, right, which is the Acala contribution page. So you can just click on contribute directly and then you will just get on to this page whereby you just key in how much DOT you want to contribute and then that's it. Boom, you are done. Same for Moonbeam here. You just get on, you click the join now, just like what I showed you. You reach here, you just go start and then you connect your wallet and then you just state how much you want to contribute and then same thing, you are done. But what I wanted to call out specifically for Acala, which is a very unique thing here, is that Acala is the only project that has a liquidity solution while contributing directly. So what I mean by that is this. If you look at Acala, right, there is 4 ways that you can contribute to Acala. Directly, contribute, stay liquid, use an exchange, which I would say is considered as indirectly, and I'll cover that later. Use a wallet. What is more important is what I was saying here about the second point, or option B or option 2, which is essentially you can contribute directly to Acala via this option and they offer a liquidity solution. So do you remember what Acala is? It's essentially a decentralized financial hub, right? So when you lock up your DOT, what they essentially do here is that they give you this thing back called LC DOT, or it's called liquid crowdloan DOT. So it's supposed to be 1:1. So if you put in 5 DOT, they are going to give you 5 LC DOT. And this 5 LC DOT is essentially what you can use to access the underlying DOT liquidity, which means if you were to go onto their platform, just like what I've showed you, you can sell it away for stable coins. You can stake it to earn yield, right? So that essentially gives you a way of still staying liquid while your actual DOT is being locked up. Acala seems to be the only one that allows you to contribute directly while staying liquid. Okay, but the thing to note is this. Okay, you need your LC DOT back to redeem your DOT, which means you can do whatever you want to do with the LC DOT when you get it. But after 96 weeks and you want back your DOT, you need to be able to give them back the LC DOT so that you can take back your real DOT. When a project wins, is essentially it implicates when your rewards will be distributed, which means the later that they win, the closer to winter you are. Okay, so you need to think about that and keep that in mind as well. Let's say a project wins in Feb and they issue you your coins towards the end of Feb to March, and it's winter, let's say by then obviously it's going to affect your profitability, right? So along the way, these things are again things that might impact or influence whether you want to participate in the crowd loan or not. I'm just going to go through indirectly now. Okay, so this is the interesting part. And to me, there are 3 ways that you can contribute indirectly. So essentially, you go through a third party. So remember when I say that the value of parallel finance is not what it is, but actually what it offers you when you contribute, right? So this is great because the first thing is when you contribute through parallel, right? It offers you additional para rewards on top of your project tokens. So to make things clear here, right, what you are essentially doing is this. You are going to contribute to Acala through parallel finance. So you need to come to this website and contribute from here. So what you are going to get is essentially still the same base rewards here, right? Everything that I've told you about it being relative and stuff like that. But on top of that, you're going to get 4 para for every 1 dot that you contribute. And on top of that, there might be some additional bonuses for some projects here. If let's say in the case of Acala, if their platform becomes a VIP referral, then you get an additional 10% of Acala. And it's the same for Astar here. So if Astar were to win in week 1, which is this week, then everybody who contributed through parallel finance to Astar will get additional 6%. So this is really very, very attractive, right? Because you're not losing out on anything at all. Because it's like you are still going to get your base rewards, and on top of that, you get the para tokens and potentially a little bit more bonuses, which I shared with you. So why parallel finance is like in number 3 now, right? It can be because of this as well. So like I shared with you, because it's their own platform. So if you support them, they actually give you up to 50% of para tokens of whatever your contributions are. So it's huge, and to people who just wants to get as many tokens or as much rewards as possible, they would probably be enticed by this, right? But the value of para is something you need to consider as well, and we don't know that yet. So I did try to look at Heiko. So if you look at this here, Heiko is essentially the sister project that is on the Kusama blockchain. And they did win, but the tokens are not out yet. So it's very hard for me to say how well they will do or not. But if you are just wanting to get as much as you can, this is definitely very, very lucrative, right? Which is why I think it's up in number 3 now. Because people, they are just going for quantity over quality. Not that it's bad, okay? But it's just the strategy, like I said, of how they want to go about doing this crowd loan. That's the reward side of things for parallel finance, okay? But the other thing that I wanted to bring up is also this. When you contribute through them, they will also give you C dot, which is essentially what I shared with you about LC dot, a liquidity solution when you go through parallel finance. So it's both you get the additional reward, and on top of that, they give you back your liquidity, right? And remember what I said about parallel finance. So it's really a supplement, and it complements one another now, because you contribute, you get the rewards, you get the C dot, you can bring it back to their platform, and you can lend, you can change the C dot for something else, you can lend, you can borrow for stable coins or whatever and reinvest it. It's a win-win here in both ways for parallel finance. I think parallel finance makes quite a lot of sense, but if you want to contribute, please be careful of what you click, because you might want to go for Acala, right? And you might want to contribute to Acala through parallel finance. So then you need to come to the parallel finance website and click this Acala, but you contribute through the parallel finance website and not click on contribute to parallel, because if you do this, it just means that you are contributing to parallel and not to Acala. The one extra project that I shared that I was keeping an eye out for, right? I think, and I did mention it just now, which is Equilibrium. So it's announced, but is not yet live. And why I really like it, it's essentially similar to parallel finance utility in a case whereby it offers you liquidity, okay? But what I really like about it is that it appears like it offers the best returns for your liquidity. So what I mean by that is this: when you contribute to projects via Equilibrium, they'll give you X dot, okay, which is essentially just another liquid dot. So what happens here is that you can go onto the platform and you are able to do all of these things. It appears that with Equilibrium, right, the use cases for the liquid dot seems to be more lucrative. For example, 40% APR on top of your regular crowdloan rewards. That is quite substantial. If you reference back the Acala one, they didn't say much. They just basically say you can use the platform. If you go onto the parallel finance one, same thing. It just basically speaks a little bit about you being able to lend and borrow and stake. But here, yeah, it's quite similar, but it also tells you very specifically that you can trade with leverage. You got up to 40% APR on top of the crowdloan rewards. And that to me is quite interesting, quite lucrative. So that's why I'm definitely keeping my eyes on this one as well. But the thing to note here is this: the number of projects that you can contribute to through Equilibrium is not many. There's only Astar and Acala at this point in time. So so if I'm thinking of going to contribute to Acala or Astar, I might hold on for a little bit and see what Equilibrium has to offer when they go live. The last way that you can do it is through Binance. The key things to take note if you contribute through Binance, there's as with every centralized exchange and the ways that they do things, there's a pros and cons, okay? So it's possible, but it's probably not for Singapore people or users who don't have a VPN now, okay? Or because we know that we can't use it, okay? But how they position themselves is that it's safer because they are a centralized exchange and they incentivize people with warm-up bonus. Okay, so if you go in early here, they will give you some form of a bonus. But the key thing to note here is that the bonus that you get is weighted means also, which means it's the amount of dot that you contribute divided by the total dot that is contributed times the total amount of warm-up bonus that they have, and then they distribute accordingly. So that doesn't sound like a lot to me, but they are offering that. Then there is no minimum staking amount. You can start as little as 0.1 dot, and they also do offer you liquidity solution here, which is B dot. Okay, but I think I've spoken a lot about that, and essentially it's the same thing, just that you can take that B dot and do stuff with it, okay? Now I'm going to move on to conclude this part. There is a watch out here, there is a catch. So I'm glad I found this, because basically there are some talks that even if the projects were to give you liquid dot, right, most often than not, like in past cases, I think Binance were also giving out like BETH, right? They actually do trade at a discount than to the real dot. So at the end of the day, yes, they say it's 1:1, right? But there has been some discussions here that say that, okay, this is a little bit exaggerated lah, okay, for someone to say trade at least 30 to 40% discount on the price of dot. I don't really think it will get down that low, but I think there might be a slight discrepancy as to the value of dot, right? So there are some people who will also say that when you first start, you will trade at a decent discount to real dot for the first 18 months, and then as it gets closer, when you need to redeem your dot back, that's when it might get closer to the price of dot. But we know that whenever these things come into play, there's always some discrepancy. It's just like how when you choose to trade or you choose to contribute to some things with a token rather than an absolute value of a stable coin, they will always peg the value of the coin at a certain point. So even if the market moves up for that day or that hour, the value of B dot here, for example, is already set for that day because they cannot keep changing it, right? The last part here, which is the strategies of how you can sort of make this crowdloan work for you, right? So I've just talked a little bit about the liquidity here. With liquidity, even if you were to contribute, and I told you about that, whereby it might trade slightly lower than DOT, right? There's actually tons and tons of flexibility here. So even if it trades lower, you need to think about the possible gains that you can get from the liquid DOT. So it's kind of like trying to take a loan from the bank, whereby you incur a small percentage of interest, right? But with that capital, you can do a lot more things. And at the end of the day, as long as your gains are more than the interest, then you don't really care, right? Because that is how you can maximize your gains or your profits. So it's the same here, because even if liquid DOT is slightly less than DOT in its value, while you have to pay for a more expensive DOT, like when you want to swap your liquid DOT for your DOT, but you have the opportunity to do more. So back to Chen's point, right? He was asking, so can I take let's say if I have the liquid DOT, I swap it for DOT, then I go and take that DOT and I go and stake it for another crowd loan. Yeah, I think you can do that. That is one way. The other way is you can just take that liquid DOT and stake to earn for you, right? To help to cover that loss. And we all know that how staking can really, really help to cover your losses, including some coins that are racked, right? Because you put it there for so long and it accumulates until even though the value is low, but you have more coins now, and that helps you to cover. So it's the same thing here. But if you are going to convert your liquid DOT to DOT, to stake for a second project, you need to keep in mind that you need your liquid DOT back to claim for your DOTs after 96 weeks. You will definitely have to buy the dip during winter. Like you will need to buy back the liquid DOT during the winter, because the liquid DOT that you used to convert into DOT for your second project came from your first project. Which means that by the time your first project hits 96 weeks, your second one would not have hit 96 weeks yet, which means you will not have your real liquidity back. So that is why you need to keep in mind, you definitely can do it, but these timelines, like what I shared with you, right? Every week only one project is going to win. So which means it will get later and later. Your 96 weeks will get later and later and later, and you will get your tokens later and later and later. So if you do this, you will definitely need to buy it during the winter, which you will still make, because DOT is like $50 now, right? But maybe in winter it might be $20. You just need to buy back what you stake so that you can get back the rest of your DOTs. Okay, but this is something you definitely need to keep in mind. It's not so straightforward as to say, okay, I'm going to take my liquid DOT and then I'm going to change it for DOT and I'm going to stake again, right? Because you're going to get caught out right at the end when you realize, oh man, I don't have my DOT to pay back. There's another way of looking at this whole crowd loan. Okay, so there are people, or there's a strategy around getting into projects that will potentially give you a chance at a guaranteed IDO allocation. Which means in this case, you're not really so concerned about the rewards. As in, yes, you are, but in this case, you're really trying to focus on token sales for gains. Okay, so crypto is generally quite kind, right? Like they normally give airdrops, they give some bonuses and perks to reward loyal folks. Okay, so I'm sure you guys would have heard of already the Treasury Take Flight and the Manta Squad game. Okay, so these are the three that has shown that this is something that might happen. Acala was Karura in KSM times, right? And Mover, which is Moon River, is essentially Glimmer. And you have Manta now, which is essentially Calamari back in KSM times. So what they have done is, if you had contributed to these projects when it was going through the KSM auctions, they now give them, or these people who contributed, the first mover advantage of buying into the Polkadot tokens. Right? So this is great. So now that's the thing here. So the strategy here is this. So those who have been into the community events because you were involved in the KSM auctions, you have a decision to make, right? It's either you want to double down or you want to diversify. Because if you want more Glimmer tokens, despite taking part in the take flight, then you might still want to participate, right? Just put your DOT for Moonbeam and get more of that glimmer. But if you already have Acala, you already have Moonbeam, then the other way of looking at it is to look at what are the other coins that are good and I believe in and I'm willing to put my money in. And for all I know, not only when they win and I get rewarded, when they eventually launch an IDO, they might reward me with an extra allocation. This is speculation, but this is, again, like I said, the more things change, the more things they stay the same, right? So this might be something that might happen again in future, as what has just happened with Acala, with Glimmer, and with the Manta Squad game now, right? So what projects have not released a token yet? Everything except the 3 that I've mentioned. So the choice here is, do you want to walk the path less walked and to look for the projects that are not mainstream, they don't really have a token yet, and that is why the earlier segment about what the projects are about is extremely key. Because if you believe in, let's say, Astar, right, at this point in time their tokens are not launched yet, not many people are into it, and I already, let's say, have Acala and Glimmer, right, then rewards for the DOT crowdloan are relative again, right? So do I really want to spend my DOT there, or do I want to go and look for something that is less mainstream like Astar at this point in time, or when week 3 comes about or week 4 comes about, when they have a higher chance of winning? So the key thing here is that you have to find something you will believe in and you have conviction in, and that will also help you to guide what you want to put your DOTs into. In conclusion here, right, what I've just done now, okay, I've just summarized the projects, okay, and it is going to be the basis of your decisions, what you want to go into because you really believe in what they do. That is the basis. The ways to contribute and the strategies that I discussed, right, there's no one size fit all. So the important things to reference, right, is your level of involvement in how you want to manage your investments. If you are someone who likes to have high involvement and you are very well versed, then you might be someone who will go for the liquidity play because you know how to stretch your dollar and make the most out of your money. But if you don't have time and you are not so well versed, then you might just want to go towards the traditional contributions. So there is no right or wrong, right? And also, if you are new and you are eligible, then you can even contribute through Binance. That's also not wrong, right? So the last thing to consider is also your risk appetite, right? If it's high, then you might even want to go for your path less walked, like I shared with you, which is the IDO strategy, right? Like you're going for token sales. That's the key thing that you are going for. So you don't really care what is popular at this point in time, but you want to go for a smaller project that is something you believe in, and you want to go and try and see whether you can get that allocation, right? If your risk appetite is not high, then you might just want to stick with the big names, right? Like Acala, like Moonbeam, and essentially just double down on them. So again, your risk appetite will also influence whether at the end of the day liquidity play is your thing, if it works for you. I'm just laying it all down, and I gave you some examples of how this information can be applied. And I hope I made it as simple as possible for you guys, okay? Because I not only want you guys to be able to take the info away, but I also want you guys to be able to apply it. Thanks guys for supporting this 2-part series of the Polkadot crowdloan. Bye bye.